Week number 9 of the 2025 fantasy football season came to a close with the Cowboys getting clobbered by the Arizona Cardinals. In today's video, we are going to be breaking down my week number 10 running back start or sit decisions for the 2025 fantasy football season. Going in depth through every single matchup from Thursday night all the way up until Monday Night Football, and I'll be telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit the running backs in each game, as well as how I believe they will finish by the end of the week. We have 4 teams on bye this week: the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Titans, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Before we do get on into things, though, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you don't enjoy today's video, that you hit that subscribe button down below. Like, it owes you some money, so leave a like on today's video as well, whether you are new to the channel or not. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Las Vegas Raiders at the Denver Broncos. Now, I do not want to overreact after the Raiders offense actually looked good up against the Jaguars, but it would appear to me that a healthy Brock Bowers is the cog that keeps the Raiders offense going. Geno Smith was looking like he needed a seeing eye dog for a majority of the season, and then shape-shifted into the Geno from a couple of years ago when everyone wrote him off in Seattle, which led to Ashton Jeanty having the second best game of his season. 13 carries for 42 yards with 5 receptions on 5 targets for 47 yards and a touchdown. If this was a better matchup up against the Broncos and it was up against a different team, then I would definitely consider ranking Ashton Jeanty inside the top 12. But in a matchup up against the Broncos, who allow the 26th most points to running backs on a per game basis, Jeanty is just in the high-end RB2 range. Raheem Mostert isn't even guaranteed to get more than a single touch. He does appear to be Jeanty's clear handcuff, but you aren't playing him with Ashton Jeanty healthy. For the Denver Broncos, J.K. Dobbins has cooled down over the last 4 weeks. Just one game with over 10 fantasy points. He continues to see 15 plus touches per game, so I'm not going to panic, but RJ Harvey continuing to see touchdowns and Dobbins continuing to get iced out of scoring those touchdowns does make me incredibly frustrated. 15 carries last week for 61 yards as the RB33. Harvey had 2 carries for 5 yards with 5 receptions on 5 targets for 51 yards and a touchdown. This is still very much J.K. Dobbins' backfield, so in the 14th best matchup for running backs on a per game basis, I think that Dobbins should get back to his old ways as a high-end running back number 2. Now, when it comes to RJ Harvey, this guy is a touchdown merchant. If he doesn't score, you are very likely to be incredibly disappointed. But based on how the running back landscape looks as we are sitting right now as a whole in week number 10 with 4 teams on bye, RJ Harvey is a guy that I would consider starting. The man has 4 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. If he could get a more consistent amount of touches, then we could really boost his ranking up. But as of right now, with not a lot of touches, he's kind of just in that YOLO RB3 start range. Now we move to Berlin, Germany, Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Get your bratwursts out. The Atlanta Falcons at the This Is Our Colts. This is our team. We bleed blue. And they indeed did not break Rodgers' back, as Seth Song said last week, as the Indianapolis Colts fall down up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Bijan Robinson absolutely screwed the pooch in week number 8 up against the Dolphins in a wet dream matchup. Then there were people panicking, people saying, Nick, maybe Bijan ain't all that. He bounced back in a tough spot up against the Patriots last week. 12 carries for 46 yards with 8 receptions on 10 targets for 50 yards as a top 10 running back. The matchup up against the Colts is one to be worried about on paper, as they allow the 25th most points to running backs on a per game basis. So while this may make some people nervous, you aren't sitting Bijan Robinson, even if he was facing the hardest matchup ever, even if he was going up against like the Monstars from Space Jam. He has been a top 12 running backs in all games outside of that blunder up against the Dolphins. So here, you got to keep rocking with them as a top 5 running back on the week. Tyler Algier could just as easily get 10 touches as he could get 2 touches. And with the amount of uncertainty that is clearly here, there is 0 reason to consider putting him in your lineup, especially in a rougher matchup. Last week, he failed to even score a single fantasy point, not even 1 point for Mr. Algier. For the first time this season, Jonathan Taylor owners around the world screamed out in pain. Just 7.7 PPR points in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. 14 carries for 45 yards and 2 receptions on 2 targets for 12 yards in a matchup where Daniel Jones looked like the 2023 version of himself, turning the ball over like his name was Tua Tagovailoa. I expect Daniel Jones and the offense to run more smoothly this week, and I get that the matchup on paper might not be the best for the passing attack. The Falcons allow the 8th most points to running backs on a per-game basis, so I expect a humongous bounce back here for Jonathan Taylor. He is a locked and loaded top 3 running back for me on the week. For Tyler Goodson, Jonathan Taylor is as much of a bell cow back as it gets. The team doesn't even truly utilize a clear running back 2. Could be Amir Abdullah, could be Tyler Goodson, but none of that even matters because you will never play him with Jonathan Taylor healthy. Knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, so you just got to leave them on your waivers. Now we move to the 1 p.m. slate of games. The New York Football Giants at the Chicago Bears. DeAndre Swift missed last week with a groin injury, so his availability for this week is definitely in question. If he does play, I expect him to slot back into the RB1 role. Now, this could mean that we see a bigger cut of the pie go the way of Kyle Monangai. But Swift should still be the guy seeing a bigger split of the snaps and the touches. The rushing attack of the Bears has been nothing short of lethal. 3 straight games with Swift scoring 15 plus PPR points, and he was the RB6 in both week 6 and 7. Last week, Monangai in Cincinnati was RB3 with 26 carries for 176 yards and 3 receptions on 5 targets for 22 yards. Facing the Giants, who are the second best matchup for running backs on a per game basis, if DeAndre Swift is in, I expect a low-end RB1 finish. If Swift is out, Monangai would also be a low-end RB1. He had the Bengals defense calling him Poppy last week, averaging 6.8 yards per carry. If Swift is back, I do believe Monangai will go back to getting like 7-ish touches. I do think, again, he could cut more into Swift's workload, but nothing so far this season has given us an indication that something will change, because we saw Monangai eat up against the Saints in week 7 as the RB12. Then he followed that up with 7 carries for 24 yards the next week up against Baltimore in Baltimore. So he still, to me, feels like a large trap if DeAndre Swift is back. When it comes to the Giants running backs, when Cam Skattebo went down up against the Eagles, it was very clear to basically everyone that Tyrone Tracy was going to be the lead back with Skattebo out of the picture. The touches and snaps after Skattebo's injury in that game painted the perfect picture that that was going to be the case. Fast forward to last week, everyone blows their fab on Tyrone Tracy, and the motherfucker is in a glorified split with Devin Singletary. Tracy was the guy who drew the start, but was out-touched 10-8 by Singletary. Singletary saw a majority of the early down work, the only goal line usage, and Tracy was more of the third down back. Now, could the script flip this week? Yeah, I think it could, and I think it will. But I would prefer to just kind of leave Tracy on the bench and just, see how this plays out, even if it is the 10th best matchup for running backs on a per game basis. Singletary had 8 carries for 43 yards with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 8 yards. This kind of feels like a scenario where neither of these guys end up being startable, and even if one of them is startable, they just barely crack that category, and it's almost like you didn't even need to have played them. So as of right now, this is just a clear stay away scenario. Now we move to the game of the week, the Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. I'm only kidding, but this is the game we're going to. The Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. Before we break down this game in depth, as well as the rest of the matchups for the RBs in week number 10, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description, you will get a free pick, plus a first time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as you play $5 in the pick'em, you get an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. How does the pick'em work, you might ask? It is incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks on the players higher or lower. If those picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but all of the picks need to hit, so make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. So Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. We'll start off with the Buffalo Bills. Sadly for James Cook, he did not find the end zone last week. Josh Allen ran in 2 touchdowns, and Ty Johnson had a rushing touchdown as well. Despite James Cook rushing 27 times for 114 yards and having 1 reception on 1 target for 11 yards, since he didn't find the end zone, he finished as a high-end running back too. This week up against a Dolphins defense that is basically a free matchup for your running back to just break a record against us. to just have his all-time best game ever. The Dolphins defense is so dog shit against the run. They are selling everyone on the defense, so they're going to be even worse. They are going to be even worse. So James Cook is going to absolutely dominate us like Joe Montana did back in the 80s. Last time these two teams played in week 3, he had 19 carries for 108 yards and a touchdown, as well as 3 receptions on 3 targets for 10 yards. I have Cook penciled in like Doodle Bob as a top 5 running back this week. Ty Johnson did score last week, but that doesn't move the needle for me, especially when I wouldn't be shocked if in this game Ray Davis was to outscore him, outtouch him, so there's no reason to start him. Just like the Dolphins defense, the Bills defense is also trash up against running backs. They allow the 7th most points to running backs on a per-game basis. Last time out, up against the Bills in Buffalo, he had 12 carries for 62 yards, as well as 7 receptions on 9 targets for 29 yards, as the running back 13 in PPR. A-Chain has been as consistent as it gets this season, and even with the Dolphins being so bad that it genuinely just gets more and more shocking every single week, just with how dog shit they are as a fan of the team, A-Chan has been the best or second best piece on this team, either him or Jaylen Waddle. He was a top 12 running back last week, even despite us getting fucked so hard by the Ravens that we need a walker to get around. I expect a top 6 showing out of him this week, and I know some people might be like, Nick, haha, the Dolphins lost to the Ravens, haha. Guess what? Chris Greer got fired. The bad man is finally gone, so it's all good with me. That was a good loss. In the NFL, there aren't good losses, but that was actually a good loss because now Chris Greer is gone. Fuck that guy. Ollie Gordon scored the first touchdown of his career up against the Bills earlier on in the season, which was awesome to see as an Ollie Gordon enjoyer, but ultimately with the Dolphins offense likely getting shafted here, the game script will not go the way of Gordon. Do not start him. Now we move to the Baltimore Ravens at the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now Derrick Henry ran hard up against the Dolphins in Lamar's return game on Thursday Night Football. 19 carries for 119 yards with 1 reception on 1 target for 2 yards. The offense looked like the Ravens we have come accustomed to with Lamar Jackson under center over the years. With the team being jump-started by Lamar, I do expect Derrick Henry to become a much more consistent top 12 asset for your fantasy team. The Vikings defense did have Jahmyr Gibbs on a milk carton last week, but I do think Derrick Henry should be able to get it done in the 21st best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis. No matchup will scare me away from Tractor Cedo when Lamar Jackson is healthy. I got him as a low-end running back 1, must-start top 12 option. For the other running backs, we have seen more Keaton Mitchell recently for the Ravens as his snaps have increased. We will also see Justice Hill as well, making both Ravens backups unstartable. Because if they don't have a clear backup, even if you think this is going to be like some belt-to-ass performance where maybe you see more Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell, since there's 2 of them, you just can't start them. Then we got the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Aaron Jones was injured and exited early up against the Lions last week with just 42% of the snaps. The AC joint sprain appears to be minor, and Aaron Jones himself said he would play this week. Now, if you take everything a player says about his own health and ability to go into the next game, you would be insane. If you remember, CeeDee Lamb said he would come back from his injury the next game and then missed multiple weeks, right? So if you just take what Aaron Jones said and believe that as the fucking truth, you are a crazy person, right? The players always want to play. They would saw off their leg like a saw trap in order to get out there, right? They always want to be playing. But since the report was that it was minor, I do think he should return. Aaron Jones was blowing the back out of the Lions prior to the injury. 9 carries for 78 yards with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 20 yards as the RB18. Facing a Ravens defense that allows the 4th most points to running backs on a per game basis, Aaron Jones is a solid running back 2 this week if he is good to go. If Aaron Jones is in, Jordan Mason will be chilling in the cuck corner. Once he returned, he instantly got his job, stolen from him, right? Jordan Mason had the job, and it's like, oh, you know what? Jordan Mason looks fine. Maybe it will take Aaron Jones some time. No. Aaron Jones instantly became the lead back again. So if Jones can go, then Jordan, the numbers, Mason, what do they mean, is a clear sit. If Jones cannot go, then Mason would be a low-end RB2. As the matchup is great, but his finishes without Aaron Jones haven't been the most ideal. But the hope is here that JJ McCarthy has just fixed everything but one great game doesn't magically mean that everything's all good. Now we move to the Cleveland Browns at the New York Jumbo Jets. Now, as you are watching this video, Breece Hall may have been traded. He has been a talking point in the trade market basically for the whole season, so maybe he does get moved, but as I'm recording this video, he is still on the Jets, so I will assume he is still a Jet, and if something does happen, then obviously I will update it in the comments and we'll discuss it later on in the week in the RB rankings video on Thursday. Last week, the Jets were on bye. Back in week number 8, Breece Hall fisted the Bengals defense with 18 carries for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as 1 passing touchdown with 2 receptions on 3 targets for 14 yards. Now, that was the Bengals defense, which is easier than beating GTA if you use a bunch of fucking cheat codes, up, down, left, right, A, B, X, Y, Z. So, facing a Broncos defense that allows the 31st most points to running backs on a per-game basis, you definitely want to lower your expectations here. I got Breece as a low-end running back, too. Isaiah Davis also looked good up against the Bengals. Shocker. Everyone looks good against the Bengals. 7 rushes for 65 yards and 5 receptions on 5 targets for 44 yards. Unless Breece is traded, Isaiah Davis belongs on the bench for I almost called him Quentin Johnston, because they're both QJ. Sean Judkins was back at practice on Monday, so my expectation is that he does play this week. It is important to follow the situation and not just leave him in your lineup because Nick said he probably would play on Tuesday, right? Because he suffered a shoulder injury prior to the bye. But again, my expectation from reading the tea leaves is that he will be in. Kevin Stefanski said he will likely be available. And speaking of Kevin Stefanski, he is giving his play calling to offensive coordinator Tommy Rees. And typically, when a guy gives his play calling abilities away, that basically means that his seat is on fire and he's probably going to end up getting fired. And hopefully, I don't wish for any man to get fired. So what I mein is hopefully with the offensive coordinator calling the plays, that means that we get a more consistent amount of touches for Quinshon Judkins, because I keep saying fucking QJ, and QJ is Quentin Johnston, so we can't be calling him QJ. So Quinshon Judkins shit the bed before the bye on paper, but that was because he got hurt. So you just want to erase that game from your mind because he was the RB4 up against the Dolphins with 25 carries for 84 yards with 3 touchdowns the week prior. Again, the Dolphins defense are a free matchup, but the Jets defense also allows the 8th most points to running backs on a per game basis. So as long as Judkins suits up, he will be a high-end RB2 for me on the week. Unless QJ misses, you are really not going to be playing Dylan Sampson. He simply just doesn't touch the ball enough. If oh my God, I almost said Quentin Johnston again. If I got Quentin Johnston on my mind, man. I got that Johnston on my mind. Pause. If QJ was to miss, then you can consider playing Dylan Sampson. Now we move to the New England Patriots at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With Ramondre Stevenson dealing with the toe injury, I think projecting him to return this week would be the wrong move. So my assumption as of right now is that he will miss. Without Ramondre, Hendo was the clear RB1 on the team in terms of snaps, which was kind of shocking to me as it made perfect sense that it would be this way. But with how Mike Vrabel has treated this scenario with Ramondre fumbling left and right, I really thought Henderson would be splitting with any running back, which was kind of halfway true. Running back 15 last week against the Falcons, 14 carries for 55 yards with 4 receptions on 6 starts for 32 yards. In the 11th best matchup for running backs on a per game basis here up against the Bucs, I got him as a low-end RB2. Terrell Jennings had 11 carries for 35 yards and a touchdown with 1 reception on 1 target for 9 yards on just 25% of the snaps, assuming Henderson clearly outsnaps him again. I don't think he will get as lucky this week and find the end zone, so I would leave him on the pine. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the expectation is that Bucky Irving will return this week after missing 4 straight games plus the bye with a foot and shoulder injury. It is important to note that we still don't have much information, and I don't expect to know anything until tomorrow on Wednesday. If he misses, you are starting Rachaad White as a low-end RB2, as this matchup is rough, and Rachaad White has been struggling recently, which makes me even more nervous. If Bucky plays, he is a mid-range running back too. He may be sluggish in his return, and match that with a brutal matchup, it definitely does scare me, but ultimately you didn't wait all these weeks to leave Mr. Bucky Irving on your bench. If Bucky is back, Rachaad with 2 A's, White belongs on your bench. It was clear this season when Bucky is healthy that White will not see enough work to start him. Again, if Rachaad White is the lead back and Bucky is out, you would be playing Rachaad White as a low-end RB2. Now we got the New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. Alvin Kamara officially has no hope any hopium I could have possibly spread about him has run out. Last week, he had 6 carries for 14 yards with 1 reception on 3 targets for 3 yards up against the Rams, scoring less than a fantasy point as he lost a fumble. I get that that was a tough matchup up against the Rams, but this guy has scored less than 7 fantasy points in 3 straight games now, and it's not like Tyler Shuck is going to be handy-mandy and fix this offense. My man Alvin Kamara will get a nice 21 gun salute as I lay him to rest. He is unstartable even in the 12th best matchup for running backs up against the Carolina Panthers. Devin Neal outscored Kamara last week on 4 touches, which just goes to show you how bad Kamara has been. I don't trust the Saints at all, and I certainly don't trust their RB2. Leave him on waivers. You might just get hit with Rico McMillan. Rico Dowdle had the Packers defense, who are one of the best defenses against the run, looking like the fucking Cowboys or the Dolphins against the run. Rico rushed 25 times for 130 yards, and not 1, but 2 touchdowns with 2 receptions on 3 targets for 11 yards. Uncle Rico got penalized for his 2nd touchdown. He hit the fucking Hingle McCringleberry celebration from Key and Peele, and even though he only hit 2 pumps, they ended up still throwing the flag. The team fed Rico and gave him the keys to the backfield, playing 72% of the snaps to Chuba's 22%. I am pretty sure they're going to give this man the key to the city after this season because of how good he looks against the Saints, who allow the 9th most points to running backs on a per-game basis. I expect a top 8 showing out of Rico this week as a must-start running back. Chuba Hubbard had just 5 carries last week, and with Rico now clearly as the RB1, you can't even optimistically consider playing him. Now we move to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. Now, Travis Etienne broke his slump last week up against the Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. Etienne was on a cold streak from weeks 5 through 7, failing to score 10 points in 3 straight games after his tremendous start to the season. Last week, coming out the bye, he had 22 carries for 84 yards with 5 receptions on 5 targets for 31 yards. The Jaguars offense operated far better coming out of the bye week. Now, there is an issue with the team. For one, Travis Hunter not going to be there, and also doesn't seem very optimistic about Brian Thomas Jr. either, which against a defense like the Texans could prove to be a disaster. They did just trade for Jacoby Myers, so that'll help even things out, but obviously Jacoby Myers and fucking Parker Washington aren't BTJ and aren't Travis Hunter. In the 20th best matchup for running backs, I just think ETN kind of finishes as a low-end RB2. Baishaw Tootin found the end zone last week with 9 rushes for 29 yards and a score, with 1 reception on 1 target for -3 yards. I don't expect him to see that many touches again, with him only scoring more than 10 points once this season back in week number 2. Up against the Texans, the smart move is to not overreact and get all hot and bothered by Baishaw Tootin's 1 touchdown and just leave him on the bench. For the Texans, this backfield is just very frustrating. Woody Marks has the burst and the ability to have the big games, but ultimately, if he can't get any big runs going, he will disappoint you, as Nick Chubb still gets a ton of touches as well. Last week was a bad matchup up against the Broncos, who are a brutal spot for running backs, but now he faces the Jaguars, who are the 24th best matchup for running backs, so he could be on the struggle bus yet again. If you have to start one of the guys, I would lean with Woody, because he could take a dump off, nice carry if the line decides to block, 80 yards to the crib. He has the ability to do that, but ultimately up against the Jaguars, I think I would prefer just to stay away, especially if CJ Stroud misses, because things are just much worse with Davis Money Mills, the draft man, under center. Chubb could get as many as 20 touches, and I wouldn't be shocked at all. The problem is, even if Nick Chubb does get all of those touches, he probably won't even do good enough, especially in a bad matchup, so I would just stay away from him. Now we move to the 4 o'clock slate of games on Sunday, the Arizona Cardinals at the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Trey Benson may return from injury this week, as he has been out with a knee for the last 4 games, with 5 weeks missed due to the bye week in week number 8. If Benson returns, he should slide in as the RB1 on this team. Last week, we saw Amari DeMarcado shove Zonovan Knight into a locker, and he had 15 touches compared to Bam's 11. If Benson misses again, I would still lean with playing Bam Knight, as I think he would start off the game as the guy, and he did outsnap DeMarcado 57% to 40%, but I just wouldn't love it in the 22nd best matchup for running backs. if Trey Benson is back, he's just kind of a high-end RB3. Assuming Benson is back, DeMarcado will likely be the third down option on the team, and Zonovan Knight will fall even further into irrelevance. I wouldn't start DeMarcado, though. For the Seattle Seahawks, the Seahawks offense is an absolute wagon. They were hitting the Commanders' defense like a fucking speed bag last week, and Charbonnet or Walker, though, did not end up showing up in a big way. I still feel the same way about the backfield as I had for the last few weeks. Kenneth Walker is the best running back on this team, but Kenneth Walker is just iced out of scoring touchdowns unless he busts off a big run from further out, because if they get to the red zone, if they get to the goal line, Charbonnet is going to get the ball. Doesn't matter if Walker marches them straight down the field 99 yards. If he falls within a millimeter of the end zone, Zach Charbonnet is tagging in and stealing the touchdown. So, we did see Charbonnet's snaps get cut last week to 35%, with Walker playing 57%. So maybe, the pendulum is shifting. Maybe things are changing. So if this continues, I may start to believe in Kenneth Walker, but as of right now, I will start Charbonnet in the RB3 range, just hoping he scores a touchdown. If he doesn't, score that touchdown, right? If he doesn't end up finding pay dirt, like last week with 8 carries for 25 yards and reception, you will be very, 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 very disappointed. Kenneth Walker III did flip the script on us last week with more snaps, but he had 13 touches compared to Sharp's 9. If there is no touchdown upside in sight, I refuse to play him until something changes. Now we move to the LA Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. Kyren Williams looked great last week up against the Saints, as did the whole Rams offense, as the Saints got hit harder than the Wet Bandits did by a paint can in Home Alone. 25 rushes for 114 yards for Kyren, with a touchdown as a top 10 running back. We did see a lot of Blake Corum as well, with him getting 13 carries for 58 yards, just like we did prior to the bye up against the Jaguars with 13 total touches. But both of those games were absolute blowouts. So you shouldn't take that as Kyren's getting his job stolen. He's still the clear lead back on the team, and in what should be a more competitive game, the 16th best matchup for running backs on a per game basis, I got him as a low-end running back 1 this week. After Christian McCaffrey scored less than 10 points for the first time this season up against the Texans in Houston in week 8, he had murder on his mind like his name was YNW Melly. A comeback like the one Ray J gave to Kim Kardashian. Running back 1 last week up against the Giants with 28 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown, as well as 5 receptions on 6 targets for 67 yards and a touchdown. If there ever was a spot where CMC would disappoint us again, it would be here up against the Rams, who allow the second least amount of points to running backs on a per game basis. But you aren't going to sit the man even in such a tough matchup. I feel extremely confident in him finishing as a top 3 back this week. For the backup running backs, B-Rob did score his first touchdown as a 49er last week. Round of applause for him, trucking his way into the end zone for a close to 20-yard rush, which is a nice reminder that B-Rob is still a great handcuff. So while he is a great handcuff, that is all he is. He isn't even a lock to see a single touch with CMC healthy, clear sit. Blake Corum, like I said when I was talking about Kyren, I feel like Corum's touches will decrease, assuming this is a more competitive game, thus making Corum unstartable, especially when he couldn't even score more than 6 points with all the touches he's gotten over the last 2 weeks. Now we move to the Detroit Lions going up against the Washington Commanders. Now, Detroit running back Jahmyr Gibbs had fantasy owners crying themselves to sleep on Sunday. 9 carries for 25 yards with 3 receptions on 3 targets for 3 yards in a game where the Lions shockingly lost to the Vikings. This was by far Gibbs' worst game of the season. And while that piss-poor showing may have lost you your week, I'm not going to panic on Gibbs, who could easily rip off 30-plus points this week up against the Commanders, who are the 13th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis. I got Gibbs as a must-start top 6 option this week. Now, David Montgomery had 13 touches to Gibbs' 12. This week, I would expect Gibbs to come out on top. So, again, you can kind of just erase last week's game out of your mind for Jahmyr Gibbs. Monty had 11 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown with 2 receptions on 4 targets for 10 yards as a low-end RB2. Monty doesn't really excite me at all. Like, what he's really doing is just frustrating the ever-living shit out of Gibbs owners, compared to actually having a good enough role to be, locked in as like a top 20-ish starter. if he was to score, right, and this is a blowout, which I would expect it to be, then Monty could easily finish as like a high-end RB3, low-end RB2, but that's really all we're to talk about him as. So for me, he's just a high-end RB3. Bill's season ended weeks ago, but we still have to talk about Jacoby. I've got Jacoby Brissett on my brain after what happened. Kyler Murray season, Nova? Kyler Murray season? Bill's season ended weeks ago, though. But we still got to talk about Mr. JCM, Ja'Cory Groski-Moret. With the tragic, gruesome injury to Jaden Daniels, it is curtains for any opportunity of JCM to actually figure things out and become a start-worthy asset. This is a three-headed backfield of death, and while JCM is the guy who should see the most touches, it really just doesn't matter. But hey, we'll always have that week 5 game where the guy scored almost 30 fantasy points. Chris Rodriguez had 12 carries for 65 yards and a score last week, playing 34% of the snaps as the RB17. I just don't think you can remotely trust any of the touches for any of these running backs, so I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Now we move to, cause you waited all day for Sunday night, the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Los Angeles Superchargers. Jaylen Warren had a tough matchup last week up against the Colts defense and ended up still having a great day. Now, it wasn't because he had a great rushing showing, but it was because he scored 2 touchdowns, 16 carries for 31 yards, and those 2 touchdowns with 2 receptions on 2 targets for -2 yards. Warren has been a very reliable mid-range RB2 option all season long, so in the 14th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis, I expect to finish for Jaylen Warren. Pause. That's worded things wrong. I expect for him to finish as a high-end running back too, as I expect the rushing efficiency to be just much better this week. Kenneth Gainwell has made it very clear that if Warren was to miss time, you want Gainwell in your lineup, but this week with Warren healthy, Gainwell is more than likely to fail to score 10 points for the 4th time in a row. I would be shocked if he scores more than 6 points in this spot, so he is just a clear sit for me. Kamani Vidal worked at the effectiveness of your cock after you drink half a handle of tea. And honestly, that may be putting things lightly because Vidal was absolutely useless last week. 12 carries for 30 yards in a wet dream matchup up against the Titans with 1 target for 0 receptions. Vidal did play 72% of the snaps, though, marking back-to-back games with 70+% of the snaps. So while last week did suck, and losing Joe Alt is even worse, I think making Vidal a sit would be very disingenuous. Shout out to Flight. It would be disingenuous. We have seen the guy rip off 2 top 10 games without Omarion Hampton, and every other game has been a great one. So if we follow that pattern, that will totally, that'll work. That definitely works, right? You just follow the patterns. Fantasy's that easy. This week will be a smash. In all reality, though, in the 23rd best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis, he's just like a mid-range RB2. Also important to note that Omarion Hampton is not expected to return until after the Week 12 bye at the earliest, and at the earliest makes me think he might miss more time than that. Jarrett Patterson played just 28% of the snaps. He had 9 carries for 44 yards. I still believe the backfield is in the hands of Vidal, so I would not magically want to roll Patterson out here. I would sit him. Final game here, Monday Night Football. The Philadelphia Eagles at the Green Bay Packers. Now, Saquon Barkley's groin injury was reported to not be serious after he got hurt up against the Giants in Week 8, and Ian Rappaport stated that if the game was closer, it is likely that Saquon Barkley would have returned to the action. We should at least get an update soon. As of right now, my assumption is, again, an assumption makes an ass out of you and me. My assumption would be that he is good to go based on that report from after the game, especially considering they had the bye week after. In the game in which Saquon got hurt, he was the RB3 with his best game of the season, 14 carries for 150 yards up against the G-Men with a touchdown, as well as 4 receptions on 5 targets for 24 yards and an additional touchdown. So while the matchup up against the Packers is very bad on paper, the 28th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis, we just saw Rico Dowdle hit him with an elbow drop last week, so I think Saquon can do something similar. Assuming his health, assuming he's good to go, I got him as a mid-range RB1. Tank Bigsby looked great in relief of Saquon Barkley, 9 carries for 104 yards. If Saquon's injury is more serious than we are being led on to feel and misses, I would fire up Tank Bigsby as a, mid-range RB2-ish type of guy. Not a guy, you're super excited to play because the matchup's tough and it's not like Tank Bigsby is Saquon Barkley. But if Saquon Barkley is back, it's just going to be a few touches for him max. So you're not going to be playing him. Josh Jacobs is on fire. The man has scored 8 touchdowns over the last 5 games with at least 1 touchdown in every single game. Last week, in an unfathomable loss to the Panthers, Jacobs looked fantastic, like Sydney Sweeney's breasts in that dress last week. And I know I brought this up a few times, but it just keeps showing up on my Twitter feed. It's not my fault. 17 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown with 4 receptions on 5 targets for 13 yards, facing an Eagles defense that ranks 17th best for running backs on a per-game basis. I expect Jacobs to continue his hot streak as a top 12 running back. I got him as a low-end RB1. Emmanuel Wilson has looked good a few times this season, but ultimately all he is a handcuff. He should get at least 6 to 8 touches weekly, and with Jacobs being the guy and getting all the red zone and goal line looks, it would just be impossible, mission impossible to play him. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below, like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It'd help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Make sure you guys do check out one of the videos on screen if you haven't seen it already. Love you long time. Have a great one. As always, good boy.